Thank you very much, and good afternoon. Welcome to the 4th Annual Building Boom Panel. I'm Jack Ryder. I'm an agent at Pacific Union. I serve on the Government Affairs, the Global Business Council, and the Education Committee as Vice Chair, and I'm your chairperson today for this event. Thank you to the Holiday Inn, to our amazing volunteer committee who helped put this event together, the SFAR staff who keeps us in line and keeps things moving smoothly, to our incredible panelists for taking time out of their day to come and educate us on building in San Francisco, and to you for being here on a sunny Friday afternoon. We have a terrific program, and at the end of today's event, you'll receive an electronic survey asking you for feedback so that we can improve and make sure that next year is just as successful. And now it's my great honor to invite to the stage Matt Fuller. In addition to his career at Zephyr, as a partner in the Jackson Fuller team, he serves as our 2017 president. Please welcome Matt Fuller.
Good afternoon. How is everyone? Hey, Dan. All right, if you're just joining us, the people in the front of the room do not bite except for Dan Hershkowitz. So those seats over there are safe, right behind him is safe. Seriously, coming up, have a seat. Today is an incredible event. We had over 300 registrations, close to 400, and in true real estate style, I know those folks will trickle in here. But this was not just an event that was put together by the San Francisco Association of Realtors. We have an incredible group of partner organizations who are recognized up here on your screen. So please join me in thanking the San Francisco YPN, Young Professionals Network, the Women's Council of Real Estate, San Francisco, the San Francisco Housing Action Coalition, the Chinese Real Estate, and the Asian Real Estate Association of America. Please, thank you very much. Also, I want to take a quick moment to thank the staff at the San Francisco Association of Realtors, as well as all of the committee members who worked to put this together. Deborah and your team, I'm not sure where you are. I know we've got some of the committee leadership standing right up here, Anita and Jack. Everyone, thank you for putting this panel together. As Jack mentioned, there will be a survey coming out as soon as this is over to your email boxes. That will be your chance to tell the San Francisco Association of Realtors how much you enjoyed this afternoon's moderating. They'll probably ask some other questions. That's the only one that you need to answer. All right. A few other events coming up, and then we're going to get this underway. Next Thursday, the YPN group is sponsoring a Real Talk event, How I Built My Business. It is next Thursday at 5:30 in the evening. You can go to my.sfrealtors.com for more information and to register. Attendance is limited to 100 because that's the seating capacity. So if you have not yet registered, please take a moment to do so. And coming up after that, on Thursday, July 13th, our next Give Back Day. This was a great tradition that was started last year by our past president, now Eugene Pack. So Eugene, thank you. If you participated with us last year or in our first Give Back Day this year, you will recall that we supported 3 charities, and we have vastly expanded that for July 13th. We're working with a group of 6, and we've got events going all throughout the city, all throughout the day. So regardless of your idea of giving back is showing up in a suit and tie and serving breakfast, or showing up in shorts and work boots and planting trees or picking up garbage in a park, we have something for you to do on July 13th. And wait for it, you can go to my.sfrealtors.com to sign up and to get additional information. So thank you very much. All right, let's get to the program. I have no idea what they're putting in the water in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, but it apparently makes you very, very tall and very, very smart. So the gentleman I have the pleasure of introducing today joins us after his undergrad at Duke and his grad at Harvard Law. However, he has been a San Francisco resident since 1997, so congratulations, 20 years. And since he has been here, and for the last 20 years, he has been fighting to safeguard the rights of all communities, including the LGBT community, of which both he and I are a part. So thank you for that, Scott, and happy Pride, everyone. That's not all he's been doing, though. He is also a tireless and very vocal advocate for public transit and improving the capacity and efficiency. And if it was up to Scott, I know he would have subways underground all across San Francisco. Let's make that happen. He has been a realistic voice fighting against the impact of climate change and how sea level rise will impact the city and county of San Francisco and our clients. He's not just a nerdy geek, though. He's also been supporting San Francisco and California's nightlife culture, and he's all for keeping the bars open later. And if that's not common sense, what's common sense? And finally, the reason that our clients love him, the reason that our clients voted to send him to the state senate, is since day one, he has been working to make housing more affordable through smart growth and common sense housing policy. So if you haven't figured it out yet, please join me in welcoming State Senator Scott Wiener.
Thank you, Matt. The water in Philadelphia actually makes you really stubborn, and so, as my mother would confirm, and you got to be stubborn to get anything done in this town. So we're stubborn, and we're going to be really stubborn in getting that bill through the legislature to let us have local control to get the nightclubs to go to 4 a.m. So we'll be very, very stubborn to try to make that happen. That was a joke. So thank you. Anyway, I'm really thrilled to be here today, and I want to thank all of the partnering organizations for putting on this conference. It's an incredibly important conversation, and you have a terrific panel to talk about development and housing in San Francisco. And it's, we talk about it a lot, but you really can't discuss it and act on it enough, because it's really the issue in many ways. And it's a challenge that we face that will have profound consequences on the future of the city and who is living here and who can live here and how diverse we are. And not just in San Francisco, but throughout the Bay Area and throughout California. And so we have to make the right choices, and we have to have the political will to make the right choices around housing. And it is incredibly hard. But if you look at what's happened, it's really extraordinary, and extraordinary not in a great way. And housing's always been expensive in San Francisco and the Bay Area. California's always had a more expensive housing market than the rest of the country, but it has gotten beyond distorted. When I moved to San Francisco in 1997 as a 27-year-old gay man coming here for the same reason that generations of LGBT people have come here, I rented a one-bedroom apartment in the heart of the Castro on the top floor with a view of the Oakland Hills. And I was paying, you want to guess how much? $1,050 a month. For that one-bedroom, heart of the Castro, top floor view of the Oakland Hills. It was twice what I had been paying in Philadelphia, and I could not believe how much I was paying. People would have a heart attack if they saw that rent today, because that would probably be a $3,000 or $3,500 apartment today. I could not move into my own neighborhood today unless I had multiple roommates. And we are, because of the choices that we have made around housing, created a situation where people who grow up in this city can't afford to come back here to live unless they're going to live with their parents, or their parents maybe had the foresight to purchase an extra home 30 or 40 years ago. Some did, believe it or not. Or if they happen to have a really high-paying job. A situation where young people who want to come here, just like young people have always come to San Francisco and the Bay Area to make lives for themselves. They struggle to do so, and we have many, many young people who come here because it's such a wonderful place, and then a few years later, or when they decide to start a family, they leave because they just can't plot a path to having housing that'll be suitable for their long-term needs. And so we have to get it together. And when I came onto the Board of Supervisors in 2011, we were still, I think, in an era where it was hard to make change on housing, but I think things have changed. And if you go back to how this all started, I think, it's back into the 1950s and 60s, when the era of suburbanization, where people were leaving cities, where cities like San Francisco were collapsing in population as people went to the suburbs. And so housing, you know, we didn't need a lot more housing. And so San Francisco stopped building any kind of significant amount of housing in the early 1960s. We didn't need to build a lot more. And then we got into some really bad habits. We didn't need to build much more housing. So in the 60s and the 70s, we systematically downzoned the city. We put more and more and more rules and obstacles in place to make it hard to create housing. We decided that urbanism was about freeze-framing your community exactly the way it is right now, or when you moved there, the city that you fell in love with, just freeze-framing it. That was your urbanism. And that environmentalism meant being against development. That it was somehow pro-environment to oppose building housing. And so we created almost like an ideology, not just in San Francisco, but in big swaths of the Bay Area and in big swaths of coastal California, going way far south and going north. And for a while, it was okay. In the 60s, 70s, you know, we were, again, we were losing population, we weren't gaining population. So we were able to maintain our diversity. People were able to make lives for themselves. Well, then things started shifting. Some point in the 1980s, around the time that the term yuppie was coined, where people started moving back into cities and rediscovering the wonderful thing called living in an urban setting. And it was slow in the 80s. It accelerated somewhat in the 90s and the 2000s. And then in the last 10 or so years, it's just exploded, where young people want to live in cities, where people who are in cities and have a kid, instead of automatically leaving, actually want to try to stay if they can. Where older people who maybe left the city 20, 30, 40 years ago are now retired or close to retirement and want to move back into the city. And so San Francisco has grown by over 100,000 people in the last decade. The Bay Area as a whole has grown by 2 million people since 1980. And we were caught with our pants down. All these people moving in, the jobs that we're creating, and we're seeing in San Francisco another I think, trend where headquarters companies that were fleeing for years, we were losing Bank of America, PG&E, other headquarter companies. We now have companies who want to be headquartered here, who are starting here, or who started somewhere else and want to either relocate here or have a very significant presence. I don't know how many employees Google has in San Francisco now. It was a while back, it was 6,000 that they quietly moved into the city. And so we're left with these crazy debates about, oh my God, we don't want more jobs. If we have more jobs, it's going to make housing more expensive. Can you imagine having that debate? But that's a debate that we have. We don't want people living here. Dig a moat around the city and put alligators in it to try to keep people out. We have these debates, and that's what, by the way, that's what the tech shuttle debate was. It was about building a moat around the city, saying we don't want people living here. And the real solution is to just have enough housing for everyone, not just in San Francisco, but in Brisbane and Palo Alto and in Oakland and in San Rafael and everywhere else, having enough housing. And in my 6 years on the Board of Supervisors, it was a transition period, I think, in terms of how we looked at housing. My first year on the board in 2011, we had a meltdown, absolute meltdown fight about whether to approve the Park Merced project, which will add 6,000 units of housing, much of it family-sized housing, and reroute an entire light rail line through the middle of that development, the ultimate transit-oriented development, while preserving and replacing 1,500 rent-controlled units of housing. It's a no-brainer. It was a meltdown fight. We went through the proposed mission housing moratorium. All of these fights after fights after fights. But I believe that we're finally at a place where people understand that we can't go on this way. We can't go on making it so hard to create housing. We also are, I think, discovering and have discovered that housing is not just a local issue. That we've traditionally pretended that every city or town is its own sort of independent fiefdom that can live in its own little separate universe around housing and just decide if it wants to add any housing whatsoever, and if so, how much or how little. If it wants to add any low-income housing, and if so, how much or how little. And that it's just up to each town or city. And we've come to learn, not surprisingly, that that doesn't work, that the housing market doesn't respect municipal boundaries, and that decisions that San Francisco makes affect Mountain View and Palo Alto, and vice versa, that Oakland and San Francisco are inextricably linked together in our housing markets. And so we are finally starting to see action by the state to step in, not to take over complete control of local decision-making around housing, but to recalibrate and to say that we don't want a centralized command and control state approach to housing, that we want local communities to have a say in terms of what happens in their communities and what kind of design and where things go, while understanding that there have to be boundaries around that local control, that it's just not okay anymore for local communities to opt out of housing, or to say, hey, we built an 8-unit building in our town, we're done, pat ourselves on the back. It just doesn't work anymore. And so we're seeing, for example, we've seen in the last few years legislation at the state level to say to local communities, you can't ban in-law units. If someone wants to put an in-law unit in, it is going to be a ministerial permit. You can't just drag them through some crazy process. They're allowed to put a secondary unit in their building. We're seeing legislation to beef up what's called the Housing Accountability Act. So that when local communities say, you know what, we know we zone that for 30 units, but we're going to arbitrarily chop it down to 10 units to make it harder for communities to do that. I have a bill, SB 35, to streamline the approval process in cities that are not meeting their housing goals. To say that if you are not meeting your housing goals, that means that if a developer comes in and says, I want to propose a project that is within your existing zoning, you're going to issue that permit over the counter. You can do some design review, but none of this, we're going to put you through a 5-year process with 6 different hearings and make you have 100 community meetings and then ultimately chop the size of the building in half, which we see happen in some places in California. That if you want to be able to do that, fine. Then you figure out how to meet your housing goals. And the goals that we set are not just dead letters collecting dust on a bookshelf. And I'll tell you, this is, these kinds of changes they cause turbulence. The League of Cities doesn't like it. There are plenty of, especially smaller cities, that hate it. They don't want anyone telling them what to do. But we are past the point where we can just pretend that every city is in its own separate universe. And we'll continue to go through that transition, and I think we're going to see some real positive change coming out of the other side. But I'll tell you, it's hard as a policymaker when you say to people who are struggling right now with an eviction or with raising 2 children in a 1-bedroom apartment, and they're really struggling, to say to them, hey, just trust me. If we make these changes, then down the road, in 10 or 15 years, it took us 50 years to get here, it's going to take us time to get out, down the road it's going to be fixed. They don't want to hear that. that they want to know what you're going to do for them right now. And so we have to make sure we have policymakers in place who are willing to take that long-term view, because otherwise we're never going to get out of this. Of course, the other pieces of this situation are particularly transit and also the public realm. We sort of got away from transit for a while, and of course if we're adding more housing density, we can't keep expanding our roads. The geometry just doesn't work. We have to have dramatically more public transportation, otherwise we're setting ourselves up for the parking wars that we see and for unending congestion. And we did some great things in the Bay Area by building BART, by building the Market Street subway, but then we sort of stopped about 35 years ago and stopped investing in transit to the point that BART was falling apart. We are seeing some really strong momentum now to redo transit, and a lot of local and regional commitment. The voters have been just fantastic in passing bonds and other revenue sources to really fix BART, to do a lot of work on Muni, on Caltrain, and modernize and expand the capacity of all these systems. We have a lot more work to do. I agree, we need a lot more subways in San Francisco, and that takes a commitment. We need the federal government to get back in the game. At the state level, we just passed SB1, which will invest $5 billion a year in transportation, about $1 billion a year in public transportation. So we're seeing some great steps forward, and we just have to keep up that momentum. And the final thing I want to mention, as we go through this new era of urbanism, where we need to make sure that we are having housing and transit in our urban centers, rather than having more sprawl, which is terrible for the economy, terrible for the environment as people commute, if we cover up open space. We need to make sure that we are taking care of the public realm in our cities and our towns. There's a reason why historically, if you look at how we developed as a civilization, there was always the town square. There was these gathering places where people can go. I don't think it's a natural state of human existence to be all spread out and just sort of within our homes and not really interact much with our neighbors, except for maybe at the supermarket. And so we are seeing a renewed focus on really renovating and improving our parks in San Francisco, and I really want to give the Recreation and Park Department and the voters a lot of credit for doing those investments. I mean, it's just extraordinary amount of great work, but also creating new public spaces. I'm heading from here to 17th and Folsom, where the city is opening up a fantastic new Plaza Park, or in Noe Valley, and Todd David is here, who played a key role in creating Noe Valley Town Square, but also widening sidewalks like we did in Castro Street, creating new public plazas, and just making sure that as we have more people and more density, that you have places for people to go, just to hang out and see their neighbors and bring their kids, so that people don't feel like they have to be cooped up in their home all the time. So I'm an optimist. I think we can get out of this situation, but it's going to take long-term perseverance, and I look forward to all of us working together to make that a reality. So have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Again, thank you, State Senator Scott Wiener, for joining us. Really appreciate it.